The silver dollar clinked loudly against the weathered wooden counter, spinning briefly before settling flat, capturing the final rays of the setting sun through the smithy's open doorway. Johanna Mills stared at the coin, her eyes wide with surprise, and then turned to look up at the tall stranger who had appeared as if conjured from the very dust of Copper Creek. "I believe the lady's horse needs tending to," the man said, his voice a smooth drawl that somehow cut through the rhythmic pounding of the blacksmith's hammer. "Put it on my tab, Frank." It was the summer of 1876 in the small town of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, a place where the horizon stretched farther than dreams and the heat made mirages of possibilities. Johanna had arrived just 3 days prior, her hopes as fragile as her finances, with nothing but determination and the old mare her father had left her when he passed. Frank Holloway, the town blacksmith, wiped his sooty brow with the back of his hand and nodded toward the stranger. "As you say, Mr. Callahan, though your tab's getting mighty long these days." Owen Callahan merely tipped his hat in acknowledgement, his blue eyes never leaving Johanna's face. "A gentleman pays his debts," he replied, "when the time is right." Johanna straightened her spine, dignity overcoming her momentary shock. "I don't accept charity, sir," she said, reaching for the coin. "I'll find another way to pay for Penny's shoes." Owen's hand moved quicker, covering the dollar before her fingers could reach it. "Not charity, madam. Consider it a loan. You're new to Copper Creek and neighbors help neighbors out here. Without that help, most of us would have been buzzard food long ago." The heat in the smithy was oppressive, but Johanna felt her cheeks grow warmer still under his steady gaze. She had come west with dreams of independence after her father's passing left her with nothing but debts and unwanted suitors back in Boston. The last thing she wanted was to be indebted to another man, especially one with eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. "I don't even know your name, sir," she countered, even as she noticed the way his tanned skin crinkled around his eyes when he smiled. "Owen Callahan, at your service. I run the Double C Ranch just north of town." He removed his hand from the coin, revealing calluses that told of hard work despite his apparent prosperity. "And you are Johanna Mills," she replied, offering nothing more. Her reasons for coming west were her own, and the fewer people who knew about her past, the better. Frank cleared his throat. "Your mare's in bad shape, Miss Mills, needs more than just shoes. Fetlock's inflamed and there's a crack in her left front hoof that needs tending. She's been ridden hard." Johanna's heart sank. Penny was all she had left, and she'd pushed the mare too hard in her haste to reach Copper Creek. "How long will she need to rest?" 2 weeks at least," Frank answered, his tone softer now, perhaps sensing her distress. "And that's if she gets proper care." Owen shifted his weight, hat still in hand. "I have a spare mount you could use in the meantime. Can't have a lady stranded in town." "And what would you want in return, Mr. Callahan?" Johanna asked, suspicion edging her voice. She'd learned the hard way that men rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. A genuine smile spread across his face, revealing a small gap between his front teeth that somehow made him seem more human, less the imposing figure he cut in his dust-covered riding clothes. "Just the pleasure of knowing I've helped a neighbor, and maybe the chance to hear your story over dinner at the Copper Kettle tomorrow evening." Before Johanna could formulate a response, the smithy door burst open and a breathless boy of about 12 rushed in. "Mr. Callahan, your foreman sent me to fetch you. There's trouble at the North Pasture rustlers again." Owen's face hardened instantly, all traces of the charming smile vanishing. "Excuse me, Miss Mills," he said with a quick nod. "Frank, see to the lady's mare. I'll cover whatever it costs." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "That dinner invitation stands. 7 o'clock tomorrow if you're of a mind." And then he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of leather and sage and a silver dollar that represented both salvation and complication. Frank chuckled as he returned to his forge. "That's Owen Callahan for you. Heart as big as the territory and twice as wild. Now let's have a look at your mare." Johanna stood rooted to the spot, staring at the open doorway. She had come west to escape entanglements, not to fall into new ones. Yet there was something about Owen Callahan that stirred her interest despite her best intentions. Is he always so? She began, unsure how to finish the thought. Forward, generous, reckless, Frank supplied with a knowing grin. Yes, yes, and yes, but he's a good man, Miss Mills. One of the best in these parts. Came here with nothing 5 years ago and built the Double C into the finest spread in the county through honest work and fair dealing. Folks around here would ride through fire for Owen Callahan. Johanna picked up the silver dollar, feeling its weight in her palm. I don't need a savior, Mr. Holloway. Frank nodded sagely as he lifted Penny's hoof to examine it. No one said you did, but out here everyone needs friends, even the strongest among us. That night, in the small room she'd rented above the general store, Johanna penned a letter to her aunt in Philadelphia, careful not to reveal too much about her precarious situation. She had come west with a plan to claim her late cousin's property and build a new life far from the scandal that had driven her from Boston. The deed to a small parcel of land outside Copper Creek was her only inheritance, her only hope. But now, with Penny injured and her meager funds dwindling, that hope seemed as distant as the stars visible through her window. She found her thoughts drifting to Owen Callahan's dinner invitation. Perhaps one meal wouldn't constitute the kind of entanglement she was avoiding. And information about the area could prove valuable. The next evening found Johanna seated across from Owen at the only restaurant in Copper Creek. The copper kettle was modest by Eastern standards, but clean and warmly lit with oil lamps that cast a golden glow over the rough-hewn tables. Owen had arrived promptly at 7, dressed in clothes noticeably cleaner than those he'd worn at the smithy, his dark hair still damp from washing. "I'm glad you came," he said after they'd ordered. "I wasn't sure you would." Johanna smoothed her napkin over her lap, one of the few niceties she'd maintained from her previous life. "I almost didn't, but I thought it prudent to learn more about the area given that I intend to stay." Owen's eyebrows rose. "Is that so?" "Most women who come through Copper Creek are just passing through, heading to Tucson or California." "I'm not most women, Mr. Callahan," he laughed, a sound rich and genuine that drew glances from other diners. "I gathered that much already, Miss Mills, so what brings you to our humble town?" "Family, work." Johanna hesitated, then decided a partial truth was safest. "I inherited a small property from my cousin. I've come to claim it and make a new start." "The old Stevens place?" Owen asked, surprising her with his knowledge. "About 5 miles east of town near Cottonwood Creek." "You know it. This is cattle country, Miss Mills. I make it my business to know every parcel of land that might affect water rights or grazing." His expression grew serious. "That property's been abandoned for near on 3 years. House is little more than a shack and the well needs clearing. Not exactly suitable for a lady accustomed to Eastern comforts." Johanna bristled at his assumption. "You know nothing of what I'm accustomed to, Mr. Callahan, and I'm stronger than I look." Their food arrived, a simple but hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread. Owen waited until the server had left before continuing. "I meant no offense," he said quietly. "It's just that life out here is harsh, even for those born to it. I've seen strong men broken by a single bad season." Johanna took a bite of stew to avoid responding immediately. When she did speak, her voice was measured. "My father was a merchant in Boston. When he died, I discovered he had mortgaged everything to cover his debts. I worked as a seamstress for 2 years to keep a roof over my head. I'm no stranger to hardship, Mr. Callahan." Owen studied her face as if seeing her anew. "Then I apologize for underestimating you, Miss Mills, though I still maintain that starting a homestead alone is a different kind of challenge." "Who said I would be alone?" Johanna countered, though in truth she had no one. "And what of you? Do you run the Double C single-handedly?" He smiled at her deflection. "Fair point. I have good men working for me. Took years to find each one, though. Trust is hard-earned out here." As they continued their meal, Owen told her about Copper Creek, about the silver mine that had given the town its start before playing out 3 years prior, about the ranchers and farmers who remained, about the Apache tribes in the hills to the east with whom an uneasy peace was maintained. "The land can be generous if you respect it," he explained, "but it extracts a price for carelessness or greed. Water's scarce, especially in summer, and there are men who'd rather take what others have built than build something themselves. Like the rustlers you were called about yesterday." Owen's expression darkened. "They're becoming bolder. Sheriff Miller does what he can, but he's one man covering too much territory." By the time they finished their meal, Johanna found herself reluctantly enjoying Owen's company. He was intelligent, well-spoken despite his frontier mannerisms, and possessed a dry wit that made her laugh despite herself. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, the stars hung low and brilliant above them. Owen offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Johanna took it. "Allow me to see you safely to your lodgings," he said. "It's hardly necessary. The general store is just down the street." "Humor me," he replied with a smile. "My mother would turn in her grave if I let a lady walk unescorted after dark, no matter how short the distance." They walked in companionable silence, their footsteps echoing on the wooden boardwalk. When they reached the side entrance that led to her rented room, Johanna turned to face him. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Callahan, and for your assistance yesterday." "Owen," he corrected gently. "And you're welcome, though I sense you're still not entirely comfortable accepting help." Johanna met his gaze directly. "Independence has been hard-won for me. I don't relinquish it lightly." "Independence is valuable," Owen acknowledged, "but so is knowing when to accept a helping hand. None of us truly stands alone out here." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, folded paper. "A map to your property," he explained. "I took the liberty of marking the best route and some features you should know about. The creek runs dry by late July most years, but there's a spring about half a mile to the north that remains reliable." Johanna accepted the paper, their fingers brushing momentarily. "That's very thoughtful. I'd be happy to ride out with you tomorrow, show you the boundaries." "I have business in that direction anyway," she hesitated, torn between pragmatism and her desire to maintain distance. "I couldn't impose further. It's no imposition, and Frank says your mare needs at least another week before she should be ridden. My offer of a borrowed mount still stands." Johanna found herself nodding before she had fully decided. "Very well, what time shall we depart? I'll meet you here at 8 if that suits." He tipped his hat, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Rest well, Miss Mills. Tomorrow you see your new home." As she climbed the stairs to her small room, Johanna couldn't help but reflect on the strange turn her journey had taken. She had come to Copper Creek prepared to face every challenge alone, yet within 2 days had found herself accepting both financial and practical assistance from a man she barely knew. The practical side of her recognized the value of Owen's knowledge and resources. The guarded part of her worried about the gleam she'd seen in his blue eyes when he smiled, a gleam that suggested he might want more than just to help a new neighbor. Johanna unfolded the map in the lamplight, studying the careful notations Owen had made. Water sources, good grazing areas, the quickest route to town, all marked with a surprisingly elegant hand. The thoroughness impressed her, as did the fact that he had prepared this before even knowing if she would accept his dinner invitation. Perhaps, she thought as she prepared for bed, accepting help didn't necessarily mean surrendering independence. Perhaps it was simply the first step in building the new life she had come seeking. Morning dawned clear and warm, the kind of pristine day that made the hardships of frontier life seem worthwhile. Johanna dressed with care in her most practical outfit, a divided riding skirt of sturdy brown fabric and a cream-colored shirtwaist, her one concession to vanity being the mother of pearl buttons down its front. She pinned her hair securely and donned a wide-brimmed hat to protect her fair skin from the merciless sun. Owen was waiting when she descended the stairs, leading 2 horses, his own rangy buckskin gelding and a smaller, dappled mare with a gentle eye. "This is Marigold," he said by way of introduction. "She's steady and sure-footed, good for someone who might not be accustomed to western trails." Johanna approached the mare, stroking her velvety nose. "She's lovely, but I assure you, Mr. Callahan, Owen, I'm quite capable in the saddle. My father ensured I had proper riding instruction." "I don't doubt it," he replied, offering his cupped hands to help her mount. "But Marigold knows this territory, and that counts for more than riding school lessons out here." Johanna placed her boot in his hands and swung easily into the saddle, adjusting her skirts with practiced grace. Point taken. Owen mounted his own horse with fluid ease, the movement of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "We'll follow the main road east for about 3 miles, then cut south toward the creek. Should take us about an hour if we keep a steady pace." As they rode, The town of Copper Creek quickly gave way to open country, a landscape of rolling hills dotted with sagebrush, mesquite, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking hidden water sources. In the distance, purple mountains cut a jagged line against the impossibly blue sky. Owen proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing information about the plants and animals they encountered. He had a storyteller's gift, bringing to life the history of the area with tales of the first settlers, the conflicts with Apache tribes, and the boom and bust cycle of the silver mine. "The land tells its own story if you learn to read it," he said, gesturing toward a distant ridge where a faint trail was barely visible. "That's an old Apache hunting path. They've used it for generations. Further south is where the stage road runs. Came through once a week when the mine was operating, but now it's down to once a month, carrying mail and the occasional passenger. You know a great deal about this area for someone who's only been here 5 years, Johanna observed. Owen smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I make it my business to learn about any place I intend to put down roots. Knowledge is often the difference between survival and failure out here. And is that why you're helping me? To ensure my survival?" He turned in his saddle to look at her directly. "I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do, and because there's something about you that intrigues me, Johanna Mills. You have secrets, just like everyone who comes west seeking a new beginning. I respect that, but I also recognize determination when I see it, and I admire it." Johanna felt herself flush under his steady gaze. "My reasons for coming here are my own. As they should be," he agreed easily. "I'm not asking you to share them, just offering a hand when the path gets rough." They rode in silence for a while after that, following a dry creek bed that would, according to Owen, run with water again after the summer rains. Eventually, they crested a small rise, and he reined his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said, pointing toward a small clearing nestled in a grove of cottonwoods. "The Stevens place." Johanna felt her heart skip a beat as she took in the sight of her inheritance. The cabin was indeed little more than a shack, a single-room structure with a sagging porch and a chimney that listed slightly to one side. A small corral stood empty nearby, its fence missing several rails. Behind the cabin, she could make out what appeared to be the remains of a garden, now overgrown with weeds. It was far humbler than she had imagined, yet something about the setting, the sheltering trees, the gentle slope of land down to where the creek would flow, the distant mountains framing the scene spoke to her of possibility. "It's not much," Owen said quietly, watching her face. "But the bones are good. New roof, some repairs to the walls, and it could be comfortable enough. The soil's fertile where it gets water. Your cousin managed to grow good vegetables and even some fruit trees before he passed." Johanna straightened in her saddle. "Then that's where I'll start. Shall we take a closer look?" They dismounted near the cabin, tethering the horses to one of the porch posts that still seemed sturdy. Owen tested the stairs before allowing Johanna to ascend, then tried the door. It swung open with a protesting creak of hinges long unused. The interior was dusty and dim, shafts of sunlight penetrating through gaps in the roof and walls. A crude table and 2 chairs stood in one corner, a stone fireplace dominated another, and an iron bedstead with a rotting mattress occupied a third. Shelves along one wall held a few dented tins and cracked crockery. "It needs work," Owen admitted, "but nothing that can't be fixed with time and effort." He moved to the fireplace, examining the chimney. "No major damage here, just needs cleaning. The roof will be the biggest challenge before the rains come." Johanna walked slowly around the small space, trying to envision it cleaned and repaired, made into a true home. "How difficult would it be to add another room? Eventually, I mean." Owen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Planning to settle in for good then?" "That's my intention," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This is all I have, Mr. Callahan. I intend to make the most of it." He nodded, respect evident in his expression. "Adding on wouldn't be too difficult. Plenty of good timber in the hills to the north. I could help with that when you're ready. My men and I have raised enough barns and cabins to know our way around building." "I can't afford to hire help," Johanna said firmly. "Did I mention payment?" Owen countered with a slight smile. "Neighbors help neighbors, remember? Though I wouldn't say no to some of those vegetables once you get them growing." Johanna wanted to refuse on principle, but practicality won out. She knew nothing about building, and the repairs were clearly beyond what she could manage alone. "I'll consider it," she conceded. "For now, I need to assess what supplies I'll need and what I can afford." They spent the next hour exploring the property, with Owen pointing out the well, which would need clearing but appeared sound, the best locations for expanding the garden, and the boundaries of her land. It was smaller than she had envisioned, only 20 acres, but included good water rights and enough arable land to support a respectable small farm. "Your cousin was a good man," Owen remarked as they stood by the crude grave marker at the edge of the property. "Thomas Stevens. Came out here with big dreams but a weak constitution. The fever took him winter before last." "I never met him," Johanna admitted. "He was my mother's cousin, actually. I only learned of his existence and my inheritance after my father passed. Yet you traveled all this way to claim his legacy." "I had my reasons," she said simply. Owen studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Well, Miss Mills, what do you think of your new home?" Johanna looked back at the humble cabin, seeing beyond its current state to what it could become. "I think it has potential. More importantly, it's mine." "Free and clear." "Not many can say that," Owen acknowledged. "When do you plan to move in?" "As soon as possible. I can't afford to keep paying for that room in town, and I need to start making this place habitable before winter." Owen frowned. "It's not safe for a woman alone out here, especially in a place that's been standing empty. There are drifters, outlaws who use abandoned homesteads." "I have my father's revolver and I know how to use it," Johanna stated firmly. "I don't doubt your courage, but this isn't open for discussion, Mr. Callahan," she interrupted. "I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision." Owen held up his hands in surrender. "At least let me and my men help you get the place secure before you move in." "New door, patched roof, cleared well. Basics for safety, not comfort. I can spare 3 men for 2 days, and we have the materials at the ranch." Johanna wanted to refuse, but knew it would be foolish. The repairs would take her weeks on her own if she could manage them at all. "And what would you want in return?" she asked cautiously. "Your promise to be careful," he said seriously. "And perhaps the occasional Sunday dinner once you're settled. A home-cooked meal is something of a luxury for a bachelor rancher." The request was reasonable, even friendly rather than presumptuous. Still, Johanna hesitated, wary of creating obligations she couldn't control. "I can agree to those terms," she finally said, "but I insist on helping with the work. I need to learn how to maintain this place myself." Owen's smile returned, warming his eyes. "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll start tomorrow if that suits. I'll bring my foreman Miguel and 2 others. We should have the worst of it done by sundown the following day." As they rode back toward town, Johanna found herself seeing the landscape with new eyes, not as an alien territory to be conquered, but as the setting for her future life. She noticed details she had missed on the outward journey. A family of quail scurrying through the brush, the varied hues of the distant mountains, the way the light played across the rolling terrain. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Owen asked, noticing her attention. "Different from the green hills of the east, but it grows on you. The space, the light, the feeling that you can breathe out here." "Yes," she agreed softly, "though I imagine it can be unforgiving as well." "Like most things worth loving," he replied, his voice equally quiet. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, reaching town as the afternoon shadows lengthened. Owen helped her dismount outside the general store, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Thank you for today," Johanna said, stepping back quickly. "For showing me the property and for your offer of help." "My pleasure." He tipped his hat. "I'll see you tomorrow then. Bring whatever you want to take out to the cabin. We'll make sure it gets there safely." After he left, Johanna entered the general store to purchase supplies. The proprietor, Mr. Watkins, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted her warmly. "Miss Mills, heard you were heading out to the old Stevens place today with Owen Callahan. Found it to your liking, did you?" News traveled fast in small towns, Johanna reflected. "It needs work, but yes, I believe it will suit me well enough." "Brave woman," Mr. Watkins remarked, not unkindly. "Not many ladies would take on a homestead alone." "I don't have much choice," Johanna replied, "but I'm determined to make it work. I'll need some supplies, food staples, lamp oil, soap, and perhaps some seeds if you have them." As Mr. Watkins gathered her items, the bell over the door jingled and a well-dressed woman entered. She was perhaps 40, with carefully styled hair and a dress that, while suited to frontier life, spoke of Eastern tailoring. "Mrs. Peterson," Mr. Watkins greeted her. "Come for your mail." "Yes, and to meet our new neighbor." She turned to Johanna with a warm smile. "Vivian Peterson. My husband is the town doctor. I understand you're taking on the Stevens place." Johanna introduced herself, somewhat taken aback by the friendly interest. Mrs. Peterson continued, "We host a small gathering every other Friday evening, just dinner and conversation. Nothing elaborate, but it's nice to maintain some civilization out here. You would be most welcome this week, especially if you're planning to settle permanently." The invitation was unexpected but not unwelcome. Johanna had resigned herself to isolation, at least initially. "That's very kind. I'd be delighted to attend." "Excellent. 7 o'clock on Friday, then. Our house is just past the church, the blue one with the white trim." Mrs. Peterson collected her mail and departed with a friendly wave. Mr. Watkins chuckled as he wrapped Johanna's purchases in brown paper. "The doctor's wife has appointed herself the social director of Copper Creek. Nice woman, though. Their gatherings are quite pleasant, from what I hear." "I'm surprised she would include me so readily," Johanna admitted. "She knows nothing about me. That's the way of things out here, Mr. Watkins explained. "People tend to take you as they find you, not based on where you came from or what your background might be. It's one of the things I appreciate about the West." He handed her the package. "That comes to $3.45. Johanna paid, wincing inwardly at how quickly her limited funds were dwindling. She would need to find a way to earn money soon if she was to make the cabin habitable and survive until she could produce something from the land. Back in her room, she packed her few possessions carefully, sorting what would go to the cabin immediately and what could wait. The reality of her situation was stark. She was nearly 30, alone in a frontier town, with less than $15 to her name and a dilapidated cabin as her only asset. The practical voice in her head, the one that sounded remarkably like her late father, told her she was being foolish, that she should sell the property and return east. But there was nothing for her in Boston except painful memories and limited options. Here, at least, she had a chance to build something of her own on her own terms. The thought of Owen Callahan's offer of assistance crossed her mind, bringing with it a mix of gratitude and wariness. He seemed genuinely kind, but Johanna had learned the hard way that men's kindness often came with unspoken expectations. Still, she couldn't deny that his help was providential, perhaps even necessary if she was to have any chance of success. The key would be maintaining clear boundaries, and ensuring that he understood her independence was non-negotiable. With that resolution firmly in mind, Johanna settled down to sleep, her dreams filled with images of a thriving garden, a sturdy cabin, and inexplicably, a pair of blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when they smiled. The next morning dawned with a clarity that seemed to illuminate every possibility. Johanna was ready when Owen arrived with his men, Miguel Vasquez, his foreman, a dignified Mexican man in his 50s, Santos, Miguel's son, barely 20 with a quick smile, and Hank, a weathered cowboy with hands like gnarled oak. "We've brought supplies," Owen explained as they loaded her belongings onto a wagon. "Lumber, nails, tar paper for the roof, some basic tools, enough to make the place secure and weather-tight." The ride to the cabin was filled with the men's good-natured banter, with Miguel occasionally translating his son's rapid Spanish comments for Johanna's benefit. She found herself smiling at their easy camaraderie, so different from the formal interactions she was accustomed to in Boston society. Once at the property, the men set to work with practiced efficiency. Miguel and Santos tackled the roof, while Hank began repairing the broken corral. Owen focused on the door and windows, ensuring they could be securely latched. "Wolves aren't usually a problem this close to town," he explained as he worked, "but coyotes might try their luck with your chickens when you get some, and it never hurts to have a good solid door between you and whatever else might come calling." Johanna was not content to watch, insisting on learning as she helped. She held boards for Owen, mixed mud for the chimney repairs, and hauled water from the well once Miguel had cleared it. By midday, her hands were blistered and her back ached, but she felt a deep satisfaction in the visible progress. They paused for a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried fruit that Owen had brought. Sitting in the shade of the cottonwoods, Johanna found herself drawn into their conversation about local affairs, water rights disputes, the price of cattle, the new schoolteacher expected in the fall. "You'll want to plant soon," Miguel advised, gesturing toward the overgrown garden. "Late for some things, but squash, beans, turnips will still grow before frost. Good eating through winter." "I know little about gardening," Johanna admitted. "In Boston, we bought our vegetables at the market," Santos grinned. "My grandmother would teach you. She knows when to plant by the moon, which plants grow well together. Very wise, my abuela." "I would welcome her advice," Johanna said sincerely. "Perhaps when I'm more settled." "She would like that," Miguel nodded. "Few young women interested in old ways now." After lunch, work resumed with renewed vigor. By sundown, the transformation was remarkable. The roof no longer leaked, the door hung straight on new hinges with a sturdy bar to secure it, the windows had been reglazed, and the chimney stood straight. Inside, the men had constructed a simple bed frame, which now held a fresh mattress stuffed with clean straw. "It's not the Ritz Hotel," Owen said, surveying their work, "but it's secure and should keep you warm and dry." Johanna felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around. In one day, these men had turned a derelict shack into a potential home. "I don't know how to thank you all," Hank shrugged, embarrassed by her emotion. "Ain't nothing, madam, just neighbors helping out. Even so, I'm deeply grateful," she insisted. "We'll be back tomorrow to finish the well housing and clear that garden plot," Owen said. "But it's habitable now if you're determined to stay." "I am," Johanna confirmed. "I'll sleep here tonight." The men exchanged glances, clearly concerned, but none voiced an objection. They respected her decision, however unwise they might consider it. "Then I'll ride out at first light to check on you," Owen stated, his tone brooking no argument. "Just to be sure everything's holding up." As the others loaded their tools onto the wagon, Owen lingered. "Are you certain about this? The town's not far, but it's far enough if you need help." "I'll be fine," Johanna assured him, though her confidence wavered slightly as the reality of spending a night alone in the wilderness settled in. "Besides, I need to start as I mean to go on. This is my home now." Owen studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "You're a remarkable woman, Johanna Mills." He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a package wrapped in cloth. "Some food for your supper and breakfast, and this," he handed her a small revolver, just in case. "It's loaded and ready." "I have my father's gun," she began, but Owen shook his head. "Keep this one too. Out here, a backup is never a bad idea." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the weapon, and Johanna felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with her present circumstances. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. You're welcome." His voice had roughened slightly. "Lock up tight after we leave. Don't open for anyone until morning." After they departed, the silence descended like a physical presence. Johanna busied herself arranging her few possessions, building a small fire in the newly cleaned fireplace, and preparing a simple meal from the provisions Owen had left. As darkness fell, she lit the lamp and sat at the table, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the night, the hoot of an owl, the distant yip of coyotes, the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. For the first time since leaving Boston, Johanna allowed herself to fully feel the weight of her decision. She was truly alone now, with only her wits and determination between herself and failure. The challenge was daunting, but also exhilarating. Here, no one knew of her past disgrace, of the scandal that had forced her to flee. Here, she could define herself by her actions rather than by the mistakes of her father or the cruelty of a former fiancé. She slept fitfully that first night, waking at every unfamiliar sound, the revolver close at hand. But when morning came, streaming golden through the newly repaired windows, Johanna felt a surge of pride. She had survived her first night as a homesteader. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Owen arrived as promised, just as the sun cleared the eastern hills. He looked relieved to find her safe and already busy sweeping years of dust from the cabin floor. "You're up early," he remarked, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. "There's much to do," she replied, "and I've never been one to waste daylight." The second day of work proceeded much like the first, with the men focusing on completing the well housing, clearing the garden plot, and making further improvements to the cabin's interior. By late afternoon, the place was transformed, still humble, but clean, secure, and beginning to feel like a home. As the men prepared to leave, Miguel approached Johanna with a small cloth bag. "Seeds," he explained. "From my wife's garden, plant the beans and squash now, they will grow before frost." "The others save for spring." "Gracias," Johanna said, one of the few Spanish words she knew. "Please thank your wife for me." Miguel nodded, a slight smile warming his weathered face. "She says you should come to Sunday dinner, learn about planting from her mother." "I would be honored," Johanna replied, touched by the invitation. When the wagon had departed, Owen lingered once again. "Will you be all right out here?" "Truly, I will," Johanna said with more confidence than before. "Thanks to all of you." He studied the cabin, the cleared garden plot, the repaired corral. "It's a good start, but there's more to be done before winter." "I'm aware of that," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "I don't expect perfection, just progress." Owen smiled at that. A wise approach to life in the West. He hesitated, then continued, "I meant what I said about Sunday dinner once you're settled. My cook does his best, but he learned his trade in a logging camp. Subtlety isn't his strong suit." Johanna found herself returning his smile. "I'll consider it. Though I should warn you, my own cooking skills are rudimentary at best." "All the more reason to pool our resources," he countered. "I can provide the meat, you can learn to grow the vegetables, and between us, we might manage a decent meal." There was something in his tone, a warmth, a hint of future possibilities that both attracted and alarmed Johanna. She had not come west seeking a relationship, quite the opposite. Yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. "One day at a time, Mr. Callahan," she said firmly. "For now, I need to focus on immediate necessities." "Of course," he agreed, mounting his horse. "But remember, Johanna, no one survives out here entirely alone, not even the most independent among us." With a tip of his hat, he rode away, leaving Johanna standing in the doorway of her new home, watching until he disappeared beyond the rise. Only then did she realize he had called her by her first name for the first time, and more surprisingly, that she hadn't objected. The days that followed established a rhythm to Johanna's new life. Each morning she rose with the sun, tended the small garden she had planted with Miguel's seeds, cleaned and organized the cabin, and explored her property. The work was hard but satisfying, and each small accomplishment, the first sprouts emerging from the soil, the shelves she constructed from scrap lumber, the wild berries she discovered growing near the creek, felt like a personal triumph. Trips into town became weekly events, necessary for supplies she couldn't produce herself. On her second such trip, she visited the smithy to check on Penny and found the mare much improved, though still not ready for riding. "Another week," Frank advised. "She's healing well, but no sense rushing it." "Thank you for your care," Johanna said, stroking the mare's neck. "I've been managing with the wagon Mr. Callahan lent me, but I'll be glad to have her back." Frank nodded knowingly. "Owen's been mighty helpful, I hear. Fixed up your place real nice." "He and his men were very kind," Johanna acknowledged, keeping her tone neutral. She was learning that in a small town like Copper Creek, every interaction was noted and discussed. "He's a good man," Frank said, echoing his earlier assessment. "Been alone too long, if you ask me." Johanna chose not to respond directly to the implied matchmaking. "How much do I owe you for Penny's care?" she asked instead. Frank named a sum that made Johanna's heart sink. It was fair, even generous given the length of treatment, but it would leave her with barely enough for essential supplies. "I can pay half now," she offered, "and the remainder when I collect her next week." The blacksmith studied her face, then shook his head. "No need, it's covered." "By whom?" "Owen settled your bill yesterday," Frank said, turning back to his forge as if the matter was closed. "Said it was part of your arrangement." Johanna felt her face flush with a mixture of gratitude and indignation. "We had no such arrangement," she stated firmly. "Please tell me how much I owe Mr. Holloway. I pay my own debts." Frank sighed, facing her again. "Look, Miss Mills. Owen Callahan has more money than he knows what to do with most days. Letting him help folks gives him satisfaction. Why deny him that?" "Because I don't want to be beholden to anyone," Johanna replied. especially not a man I barely know. Fair enough, Frank conceded. But consider this out here, we all depend on each other in some way. Today he helps you, tomorrow you help someone else. That's how communities survive. Johanna left the smithy with mixed feelings. She appreciated Owen's generosity, but was uncomfortable with his assumption that she would accept it without discussion. It smacked of the paternalism she had come west to escape. That evening she was surprised by a visitor. Dr. Peterson's wife arrived in a small buggy, bearing a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I hope I'm not intruding," Vivian said as Johanna welcomed her. "I was visiting a patient near here and thought I'd bring you some fresh bread and preserves." Setting up a household from scratch is always challenging. "That's very kind," Johanna said, genuinely touched. "Please come in." Vivian entered the cabin, her approving gaze taking in Johanna's efforts. "You've done wonders in such a short time, it's quite cozy already." They shared tea at the small table, and Johanna found herself enjoying the older woman's company. Vivian was intelligent and well-read, with a refreshing directness that put Johanna at ease. "How are you finding Copper Creek?" Vivian asked. "It must be quite different from Boston." "It is," Johanna agreed, "but in many ways that's precisely what I was seeking." Vivian nodded understandingly. "Many of us came west for a fresh start. My husband and I left Philadelphia after he lost his position at the hospital. Politics, you understand. Here, he's valued for his skills rather than his connections." As they talked, Johanna found herself sharing more than she had intended about her background, her father's business failures, the years working as a seamstress, the unexpected inheritance that had brought her west. She omitted only the most painful parts of her story. "And what of your family?" Vivian asked. "Do they approve of your adventure?" "My parents are both gone," Johanna replied. "There's an aunt in Philadelphia who thinks I've taken leave of my senses, but she's the only close relative remaining." Vivian patted her hand sympathetically. "Then you must allow us to be your family here, which reminds me our gathering tomorrow evening. You will still attend?" "Of course," Johanna promised, "though I have little to wear that's suitable for a social occasion." "Nonsense," Vivian declared. "We're not so formal here. Your Sunday best will be more than adequate." After Vivian left, Johanna found herself looking forward to the gathering with unexpected anticipation. Perhaps frontier society would prove more welcoming than the rigid circles of Boston, where her father's bankruptcy and her broken engagement had made her an object of pity and gossip. The following evening, Johanna wore her one good dress, a simple blue poplin with modest trim that had once been fashionable in Boston. She arranged her hair carefully and pinned her mother's cameo at her throat, then set out for town in the borrowed wagon. The Petersons' home was among the finest in Copper Creek, a well-built two-story house with a wide porch and actual glass windows, a rarity in the frontier town. Several other buggies and horses were already tethered outside when Johanna arrived. Vivian welcomed her warmly, introducing her to the gathered guests, the mayor and his wife, the bank manager, the schoolteacher, a formidable spinster named Miss Hawkins, and several prominent ranchers and merchants with their spouses. Owen Callahan was among them, dressed in a clean black suit that transformed him from frontier rancher to something approaching an Eastern gentleman. His eyes found hers immediately, lighting with pleasure at her arrival. "Miss Mills," he greeted her, crossing the room. "You look lovely this evening." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan," she replied formally, aware of curious glances from the other guests. "I understand I owe you thanks for settling my account with Mr. Holloway." A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Frank shouldn't have mentioned that." "It wasn't meant to embarrass you. Nevertheless, I prefer to pay my own way," Johanna said quietly. "I'll reimburse you when I can." Owen looked as if he might argue, then thought better of it. "As you wish, though I consider it simply the extension of our original arrangement at the smithy." Before Johanna could respond, Vivian called everyone to dinner. The table was set with fine china and silver, a display of civilization in the wilderness that clearly delighted the hostess. The conversation flowed easily, touching on local concerns, news from the East brought by recent arrivals, and plans for the town's future. "We're hoping to build a proper school by spring," the mayor explained. "Can't expect to attract families without education for the children." And a lending library, Miss Hawkins added firmly. The mind requires nourishment as surely as the body. What about you, Miss Mills? The bank manager's wife asked. What plans do you have for your property? All eyes turned to Johanna, who suddenly felt the weight of their expectations. I hope to establish a small farm, she replied carefully. Vegetables primarily, perhaps some fruit trees and chickens. Nothing ambitious, but enough to support myself comfortably. A worthy goal, the mayor nodded approvingly. Self-sufficiency is the backbone of this territory. Though it's a hard life for a woman alone, his wife added with a pointed glance at Owen, especially come winter. Johanna felt her back stiffen. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mrs. Hargrove, and I value my independence. As well you should, Owen interjected smoothly, but Mrs. Hargrove makes a fair point about winter. The isolation can be challenging for anyone, regardless of gender. The conversation moved on, but Johanna remained aware of Owen's attention throughout the meal. When the men withdrew for cigars and the women gathered in the parlor, Vivian seated herself beside Johanna. Owen Callahan is quite taken with you, she observed quietly. He's a good man, you know, honest, hardworking, and more cultured than most in these parts. He was educated back east before coming west. I'm not looking for a husband, Mrs. Peterson, Johanna stated firmly. I came here to build a life on my own terms. Vivian smiled understandingly. Of course, but life has a way of offering us opportunities we didn't anticipate. It would be a shame to close yourself off to possibilities out of principle alone. When the evening concluded, Owen offered to escort Johanna home. It's dark and the trail can be treacherous at night, he explained, though she was tempted to refuse on principle. Practicality won out. Thank you, that would be appreciated. They rode in companionable silence for a time, the night alive with sounds around them. Finally, Owen spoke. I apologize if I overstepped by paying your bill at the smithy. It wasn't my intention to undermine your independence. Johanna considered his words before responding. I believe you mean well, Mr. Callahan, but you must understand I left Boston partly to escape a society where women are considered perpetual dependents. I need to succeed or fail on my own merits. I understand that desire better than you might think, Owen said quietly. When I came west, I was running from expectations to a family legacy I had no interest in continuing, a life mapped out without my consent. What sort of legacy? Johanna asked, curiosity piqued. Banking, he replied with a wry smile. 4 generations of Callahan men counting other people's money and making polite conversation at tedious social events. My father was determined I would be the 5th. Yet here you are, raising cattle in Arizona territory. To my family's eternal dismay, Owen confirmed. Though they've resigned themselves to it now that the ranch is successful. My point is, I respect your need for independence. I merely offered help as one neighbor to another, not as a man presuming authority over a woman. Johanna found herself softening at his explanation. Then I thank you, neighbor, but in the future I'd appreciate being consulted before you settle my accounts. Fair enough, he agreed readily, though I hope you'll allow me to continue checking on you occasionally. Not because you're a woman alone, but because that's what neighbors do out here. I can accept that arrangement, Johanna conceded. When they reached her cabin, Owen insisted on checking the perimeter before leaving, a precaution Johanna found both touching and unnecessary. As he prepared to depart, he hesitated. That dinner invitation still stands. Sunday, if you're amenable, nothing formal, just a meal shared between friends. Johanna considered his earnest expression in the moonlight. Friends, she repeated thoughtfully. Yes, I believe I can accept dinner on those terms. His smile illuminated his face. Excellent. I'll send the wagon for you at noon. My cook will be delighted to have someone new to impress. After he left, Johanna stood in the doorway of her cabin, watching the stars wheel overhead. The evening had been pleasant, even enjoyable, a reminder that solitude, while valuable, needn't be absolute. Perhaps there was a middle ground between complete independence and the stifling constraints she had fled. The week passed quickly, filled with the endless tasks of establishing her homestead. Johanna cleared more of the garden, repaired the chicken coop in anticipation of eventually acquiring some hens, and continued organizing the cabin's interior. Each day brought new challenges and small victories. From successfully baking bread in the temperamental fireplace to discovering a wild apple tree on the edge of her property, on Saturday, she made another trip to town for supplies and to check on Penny. The mare was fully recovered, and Frank agreed she could return home the following week. As Johanna was leaving the smithy, a commotion in the street drew her attention. A group of riders had entered town, their horses lathered and blowing hard. At their center was a wagon bearing what appeared to be injured men. Dr. Peterson emerged from his office, medical bag in hand, as the riders halted outside the sheriff's office. Curious, Johanna moved closer, recognizing Miguel among the riders. His expression was grim as he spoke with the sheriff. "Rustlers," he explained, his accent thickening with emotion. "They hit the north pasture again, took 30 head at least. We tracked them to the canyon, but they were waiting, ambushed us." The injured men, Johanna realized, were Owen's ranch hands. She scanned the group anxiously, relief washing over her when she spotted Owen dismounting. He was dusty and disheveled, with what appeared to be a bloodstain on his shirt sleeve, but otherwise unharmed. He noticed her almost immediately, his expression shifting from anger to concern. "Johanna," he acknowledged with a nod. "Bad business, I'm afraid. Might have to postpone our dinner tomorrow." "Of course," she replied quickly. "Are you hurt?" He glanced at his arm dismissively. "Just a graze, others weren't so fortunate." Santos took a bullet in the shoulder and Hanks got a nasty head wound. Dr. Peterson was already examining the injured men in the wagon. "Get them to my office," he directed. "None of these wounds appear life-threatening, but they'll need proper care." As the injured were transported to the doctor's house, Johanna found herself following, propelled by concern for the men who had so generously helped her. Vivian welcomed her assistance, and soon Johanna was busy tearing strips for bandages and boiling water for the doctor's instruments. Owen remained with his men throughout their treatment, his face tight with controlled anger. When the doctor had finished, he stepped outside to where Johanna waited on the porch. "Thank you for helping," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "It means a great deal to them, to all of us." "They're good men," Johanna replied simply. "I'm glad the injuries weren't worse." Owen's expression darkened. "This time, but the rustlers are growing bolder. 3 ranches hit in the past month, and the sheriff doesn't have the manpower to patrol effectively." "What will you do?" "Increase our own patrols. Work with the other ranchers to coordinate, and hope we can identify who's behind it before someone gets killed." He rubbed a hand across his face, suddenly looking exhausted. "I'm sorry about tomorrow. I need to stay with my men, make arrangements for the ranch while they recover." "There's no need to apologize," Johanna assured him. "Perhaps another time when things are more settled." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that." As Johanna returned to her homestead that evening, she found herself troubled by the day's events. The violence was a stark reminder of the realities of frontier life, where law was often distant and survival depended on self-reliance and community support. She thought of Owen and his men, putting themselves at risk to protect their livelihood, and felt a new appreciation for the precarious balance of life in the territory. The following days brought scattered news of the rustlers. According to town gossip, the sheriff had formed a posse to track them, so far without success. Owen was among the searchers, and Johanna found herself listening eagerly for any word of their progress, concerned not just for the community's safety but for Owen specifically. Nearly a week after the incident, as Johanna was working in her garden, she heard the approach of a rider. Looking up, she was surprised to see Owen dismounting at her gate. He looked tired but less grim than when she'd last seen him. "Mr. Callahan," she greeted him, brushing soil from her hands as she approached. "This is unexpected." "I was patrolling nearby," he explained, "and thought I'd check on you. It's been a difficult week." "So I've heard. Please come in. I was just about to make some tea." Inside the cabin, Johanna busied herself with the kettle while Owen settled at the table. She noticed he moved stiffly, favoring his injured arm. "How are your men?" she asked, setting cups before them. "Recovering well, thanks to Dr. Peterson. Santos will need more time before he can return to full duties, but Hank's already complaining about being kept from work." A faint smile crossed his face. "They're a stubborn lot. And the rustlers," Owen's expression hardened, "still out there. We found their camp, but they were long gone." "Tracks headed south toward the border." He sipped his tea thoughtfully. But that's not why I came. I wanted to make good on that dinner invitation. Johanna raised her eyebrows questioningly. My cook is preparing a special meal tomorrow, Owen continued. Nothing elaborate but better than the usual fare. I thought if you're willing I could send the wagon for you around noon. Despite herself, Johanna felt pleased by the invitation. I'd like that, she said simply. Owen's smile returned, warming his tired eyes. Good, that's good. They talked for a while longer about her garden's progress, about Penny's imminent return, about the town's plans for a harvest festival in the autumn. As he prepared to leave, Owen paused at the door. Thank you for the tea, he said, and for the company, it's been a comfort. The sincerity in his voice touched something in Johanna, a recognition of shared loneliness perhaps. You're welcome, she replied softly. Until tomorrow then. The following day dawned clear and mild, perfect for the ride to the Double C Ranch. Johanna dressed with care in her second-best dress, a green calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her hair in a simple but flattering style. She told herself the effort was merely respect for the occasion, not a desire to impress her host. The wagon arrived precisely at noon, driven by a cheerful young ranch hand who introduced himself as Billy. The journey to the ranch took nearly an hour, following a well-maintained road through increasingly verdant countryside. As they crested a hill, Johanna caught her first sight of the Double C, a sprawling complex of buildings nestled in a lush valley, with corrals, barns, bunkhouses, and at its center, a substantial two-story house built of solid timber. Mr. Callahan built that house himself, Billy informed her proudly as they approached. Well, him and the men, took nearly a year, but it's the finest place for 50 miles. Owen was waiting on the porch as they arrived, dressed in clean clothes with his hair still damp from washing. He helped Johanna down from the wagon, his hand lingering briefly at her waist. Welcome to the Double C, he said, his smile genuine. I hope the ride wasn't too tiring. Not at all, Johanna assured him. Your ranch is beautiful. I had no idea it was so extensive. It's grown considerably these past few years, Owen acknowledged, leading her inside. When I arrived, there was nothing but a one-room cabin and about 50 head of cattle. Now we're running over 2,000 head on 20,000 acres. The interior of the house was a surprising blend of frontier practicality and Eastern refinement. The floors were polished wood, the windows draped with actual curtains, and the furniture, while sturdy, showed signs of craftsmanship beyond mere functionality. A small bookshelf in the corner held several dozen volumes, their leather bindings suggesting quality rather than quantity. You've created quite a home, Johanna remarked, noting these details with appreciation. It's comfortable enough, Owen replied modestly. Though it could use a woman's touch in some respects. My mother sent those curtains last Christmas, along with not-so-subtle hints about settling down. Johanna felt a flutter of discomfort at the implication but chose to ignore it. And the books, were those also gifts? No, those came with me from Boston, some comforts I wasn't willing to sacrifice to frontier living. He indicated a worn volume of Emerson's essays. Though I confess, there's less time for reading than I'd like. Dinner was served in a bright dining room with windows overlooking the valley. The cook, a burly man named Peterson who had indeed learned his trade in logging camps, had outdone himself with a meal of roast beef, fresh vegetables, and even an apple pie for dessert. This is wonderful, Johanna said after her first bite. Please convey my compliments to your cook. Owen smiled. I will, though it may go to his head. He rarely has anyone to impress besides hungry cowboys with more appetite than discrimination. They talked easily throughout the meal, finding common ground in their shared Eastern backgrounds and mutual love of literature. Owen spoke of his early years on the ranch, the challenges and setbacks, the gradual building of something lasting. It wasn't easy, he admitted. That first winter I nearly gave up a dozen times, but there's something about this land it gets under your skin. The space, the freedom, the sense that what you build is truly your own. I understand that feeling, Johanna said. Even in these few weeks, I've come to love my little homestead. It may not be much, but every improvement is the result of my own efforts. Owen studied her thoughtfully. You're remarkably resilient, Johanna Mills. Many would have been defeated by half the challenges you've faced. Necessity is a powerful motivator, she replied with a slight smile, "and stubbornness runs in my family." After dinner, Owen showed her around the ranch, the corrals where young horses were being trained, the blacksmith shop where tools were made and repaired, the spring house where milk and butter were kept cool. Everywhere there was evidence of careful planning and hard work. "Your men respect you," Johanna observed as they walked. "That's clear from how they speak of you." "I try to treat them fairly," Owen said. "Many ranchers see their hands as interchangeable tools. I prefer to think of them as partners in a shared enterprise. They work harder that way, and loyalty goes both directions." As the afternoon waned, they returned to the house. Owen led her to a small study where a chess set stood ready on a table near the window. "Do you play?" he asked, gesturing toward the carved pieces. "My father taught me," Johanna replied, "though it's been some time since I had a worthy opponent." "Then let's see if your skills remain sharp," Owen challenged with a smile. They played as the sun descended toward the hills, each finding in the other a matched intellect. Johanna won the first game, Owen the second, and they were deep into a third when they realized the light was fading. "I should return home before dark," Johanna said reluctantly, making her final move. "Checkmate, I believe." Owen examined the board, then laughed in genuine appreciation. "Well played. I haven't been beaten twice in one day since my Harvard professor took pity on an overconfident freshman." He rose, offering his hand to help her from her chair. "But you're right about the hour. I'll have the wagon brought around." As they waited on the porch, Johanna found herself reluctant for the day to end. It had been pleasant, more than pleasant, to spend time with someone who challenged her mind and respected her independence while offering companionship without demands. "Thank you for today," she said simply. "It was restorative." Owen's expression softened in the golden light. "The pleasure was mine, Johanna. Perhaps we could make it a regular occurrence. Sunday dinners when duties permit." The request was reasonable, even welcome, yet Johanna hesitated. Every step toward connection was also a step toward potential vulnerability. "Perhaps," she allowed. "Though I insist you let me host next time. My cooking may not rival your Peterson's, but I make a passable stew." "I'd be honored," Owen replied, his smile warming her more than the evening sun. "Next Sunday, then, at your homestead." Before she could respond, a rider approached at speed, dust billowing behind him. It was Miguel, his expression urgent. "Patron," he called. "Riders approaching from the south. Marcos thinks it's the rustlers coming back for more." Owen's demeanor changed instantly, all warmth replaced by alert tension. "How many?" "At least a dozen, maybe more. They're still a few miles out, but heading this way." Owen turned to Johanna, conflict evident in his expression. "I need to deal with this. Billy will get you home safely." "Of course," she replied, concern tightening her chest. "Be careful, Owen." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. He touched her hand briefly, a gesture both reassuring and oddly intimate. "Lock your doors tonight," he advised. "If there's trouble, ride for town immediately." The journey home was tense, with Billy keeping a vigilant watch as they traveled. He insisted on checking Johanna's cabin before leaving, making sure all was secure. "Mr. Callahan would have my hide if anything happened to you, madam," he explained as he departed. "He thinks mighty highly of you, if you don't mind my saying so." Alone in her cabin, Johanna found sleep elusive. She thought of Owen facing unknown dangers, of the growing bond between them, of the complexities of building a new life while allowing new connections. When she finally slept, her dreams were a confused mix of gunfire, chess pieces, and Owen's smile as he helped her from the wagon. Morning brought no news, which Johanna chose to interpret as positive. She threw herself into her work, preparing the ground for more plantings, repairing a leak in the roof that the previous night's breeze had revealed, and beginning to sand the rough cabin walls in preparation for whitewashing. It was mid-afternoon when she heard riders approaching. Looking out, she was relieved to see Owen at the head of a small group, all appearing unharmed. She stepped onto the porch as they dismounted. "I hope we're not intruding," Owen said by way of greeting. "We've been tracking those rustlers since dawn, and your homestead was nearest when we needed to rest the horses." "Of course not," Johanna replied, noting the exhaustion evident in all their faces. "Please come in, I'll put on coffee." As the men watered their horses, Owen joined her inside. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said quietly. "It wasn't how I intended our day to end." "There's no need to apologize," Johanna assured him. "Did you find the rustlers?" Owen's expression hardened. "They hit the Parker place last night. Took 40 head and shot one of Parker's men when he tried to stop them. We've been following their trail, but they're headed into rough country. Sheriff's called off the pursuit for now, says we need more men and supplies if we're going into those hills." "And you disagree," Johanna surmised from his tone. "Every hour gives them more distance," Owen confirmed. "But my men are exhausted and the horses need rest. We'll start again at first light." The men accepted coffee gratefully, drinking in weary silence before remounting to continue to town. As they prepared to leave, Owen lingered. "Our Sunday dinner seems to be postponed again," he said with a wry smile. Rain check," Johanna agreed. "Be careful out there, Owen. These men sound dangerous." His expression softened momentarily. "I will. And you keep that revolver close until this business is settled." After they departed, Johanna found herself standing in the doorway long after the dust had settled, a vague uneasiness settling in her chest. The pattern of their interactions was becoming familiar moments of connection interrupted by the harsh realities of frontier life. Yet each interruption seemed to strengthen rather than diminish their growing bond, as if adversity served to highlight what truly mattered. The following days brought scattered news of the rustlers. According to reports from travelers, several posses had formed, combining forces to track the thieves into the hills. The town was unusually quiet, with many men absent on the hunt. Johanna kept busy, making the trip to town to finally bring Penny home. The mare seemed delighted to be back, whickering softly as she explored the repaired corral. Having her own horse again expanded Johanna's range, allowing her to explore more of her property and the surrounding area. On one such exploration, she discovered a small spring-fed pond hidden in a grove of trees at the far boundary of her land. The water was clear and cool, teeming with tiny fish, and the surrounding grass lush despite the summer heat. It was a secret treasure, the kind of discovery that reinforced her decision to come west. She was returning from this spot late one afternoon, about a week after Owen's visit, when she noticed smoke rising from her cabin chimney. Alarmed, she approached cautiously, Penny's reins tight in her hand. As she drew closer, she recognized a horse tethered outside Owen's buckskin gelding. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by confusion and a touch of irritation at the presumption. She secured Penny in the corral before approaching the cabin. The door stood open, and inside, Owen was tending a fire in the fireplace, a pot of something aromatic bubbling on the iron hook. "I see you've made yourself at home," Johanna remarked from the doorway, unable to keep a hint of censure from her voice. Owen looked up, his expression shifting from concentration to contrition. "I apologize for the intrusion. I've been on the trail for 5 days straight and thought you might appreciate a hot meal as much as I would." Now that he mentioned it, he did look exhausted, with several days' growth of beard and dark circles under his eyes. Johanna's irritation softened. "You look terrible," she observed, setting down her satchel. "Have you slept at all?" "A few hours here and there," Owen admitted, stirring the pot. "We finally tracked the rustlers to their hideout, a box canyon about 40 miles southwest of here. Sheriff's organizing a proper posse to go in after them, but it will take a few days to gather enough men. So you decided to cook dinner in the meantime?" Johanna asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. Owen gestured toward the pot with a tired grin. "Peterson packed supplies, including the makings for his trail stew. It seemed a shame to waste them, and I remembered our postponed dinner engagement." Johanna shook her head, torn between amusement and exasperation. "You are the most presumptuous man I've ever encountered, Owen Callahan, guilty as charged," he acknowledged. "Though in my defense, I did bring enough to share, and I cleaned your fireplace before starting the cooking." Indeed, the hearth was neater than she had left it, swept clean of ash and arranged with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. "I suppose I can overlook the trespass just this once," she conceded, moving to help with the meal. They ate at her small table as dusk settled outside, the stew surprisingly delicious for trail food. Owen spoke of the pursuit, the false trails, the difficult terrain, the eventual discovery of the rustlers' hideout. "It's a well-organized operation," he explained, "not just random thieves." They have connections to buyers in Mexico, forged brands, proper planning. Someone with intelligence is behind it. Do you have any idea who? Johanna asked, passing him more bread. Owen's expression grew contemplative. There are rumors about a man named Hardin who used to run protection rackets in Kansas. Word is he moved west after things got too hot back there. Nobody's seen him, but his methods match. As they finished eating, Johanna noticed Owen struggling to keep his eyes open. When was the last time you slept in an actual bed? She asked. Tuesday, I think, maybe Monday. He rubbed his eyes wearily. Days tend to blur together on the trail. You're in no condition to ride back to town tonight, Johanna stated firmly. You can take the bed. I'll make a pallet by the fire. Owen started to protest, but Johanna silenced him with a raised hand. This isn't negotiable. You're dead on your feet, and I won't have your exhaustion-induced accident on my conscience. Too tired to argue further, Owen accepted her offer with gratitude. After helping clear the dishes, he removed his boots and gun belt, stretching out on her narrow bed with a sigh of profound relief. Within minutes, he was deeply asleep, the lines of fatigue softening in repose. Johanna watched him for a moment, struck by the vulnerability of this man who projected such strength and confidence when awake. In sleep, he looked younger, the cares of responsibility temporarily lifted from his shoulders. She arranged her bedding near the fireplace, banking the coals for the night. As she settled down to sleep, she reflected on the strange turns her life had taken since arriving in Copper Creek. She had come seeking independence and solitude, yet increasingly found herself drawn into the life of the community, particularly the life of the man now sleeping in her bed. Perhaps, she thought drowsily, independence didn't necessarily mean isolation. Perhaps it was possible to maintain one's autonomy while still forming meaningful connections. Morning came with a gentle rain pattering on the roof, the first in weeks. Johanna woke to find Owen already up, stoking the fire and preparing coffee. You should have woken me, she said, rising from her makeshift bed. You looked peaceful, he replied, handing her a steaming cup. Besides, making coffee is the least I can do after commandeering your bed. They shared a simple breakfast of biscuits and honey, the rain creating a cozy atmosphere inside the cabin. Owen seemed refreshed by his night's rest, the worst of his exhaustion washed away by sleep. I should head back to town, he said as they finished eating. The sheriff will be gathering men for the posse today. Will you go with them? Johanna asked, unable to keep concern from her voice. Owen nodded gravely. I have to. 3 of my men were injured by these rustlers. Besides, every rancher in the area has lost cattle to them. It's time to end it. When will you leave? Tomorrow at dawn, most likely. It will take at least 2 days to reach the canyon, maybe more if the rain continues. He glanced at her thoughtfully. Will you do something for me while I'm gone? Johanna raised her eyebrows questioningly. Stay in town, Owen said seriously. At least until we return. With so many men away, outlying homesteads will be vulnerable. The Petersons would welcome you, I'm sure. Johanna bristled at the suggestion. I'm perfectly capable of defending myself, Owen. I don't doubt your courage, he countered, but these are dangerous men if they realized most of the men in the area were gone. He let the implication hang in the air, though she wanted to refuse on principle. Johanna recognized the logic in his concern. I'll consider it, she conceded. But I won't abandon my homestead entirely. There are animals to tend, crops that need care. Fair enough, Owen agreed, obviously relieved by even this partial concession. Perhaps you could check on things during the day but stay in town at night. As he prepared to leave, the rain slackened to a fine mist. Owen paused at the door, turning back to face Johanna. Thank you for your hospitality. It meant more than you know. You're welcome, she replied simply. Be careful out there, Owen. These men have already proven they're willing to kill. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a moment of raw honesty. I have more reason than ever to return safely, he said quietly, his gaze holding hers. Before Johanna could respond, he stepped forward and took her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply sincere. Then he was gone, mounting his horse and riding away through the light rain, leaving Johanna standing in the doorway with her thoughts in turmoil. The following days were filled with tension as news from the posse trickled back to town. Johanna, honoring her promise, spent her nights in a small room at the Copper Creek Hotel while riding out to her homestead each day to tend to chores. The arrangement was inconvenient, but allowed her to maintain her property while easing Owen's concerns for her safety. The town itself had taken on an eerie quiet, with so many men absent. Those remaining primarily older men, storekeepers, and a few ranchers who had stayed behind to protect their properties, moved about with watchful vigilance. Women traveled in groups when possible, and few ventured out after dark. On the third day after the posse's departure, Johanna was working in her garden when she heard riders approaching. Looking up, she was alarmed to see 3 unfamiliar men reining in at her gate. Their appearance was rough, their manner threatening as they dismounted and approached. "Well, well," the leader drawled, a tall man with a pockmarked face and cold eyes. "What have we here? A pretty lady all alone in the wilderness." Johanna straightened, acutely aware of the distance between herself and the cabin where Owen's revolver lay hidden under her pillow. "This is private property," she stated firmly. "State your business or leave." The men exchanged amused glances. "Feisty," the leader commented. "I like that in a woman. The name's Hardin, miss. My friends and I are just passing through looking for some hospitality." Johanna felt her blood run cold at the name. This was the man Owen had mentioned, the suspected mastermind behind the rustling operation. If he was here instead of at the hideout, it meant the posse might be riding into a trap. "There's nothing for you here," she replied, her mind racing. "The nearest town is Copper Creek, about 5 miles east. They have a hotel." Hardin stepped closer, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Now that's not very neighborly. We've been riding hard and we're powerful thirsty. Surely you can spare some water, maybe a bite to eat." "The well is there," Johanna said, gesturing toward it. "Help yourselves, then be on your way." The second man, shorter but more heavily muscled, moved toward the cabin. "Nice little place you got here. Living all alone, are you?" "That's none of your concern," Johanna retorted, her heart pounding. "Take your water and go." Hardin's pretense of civility dropped away. "Here's the thing, miss, we're not just looking for water. We need a place to lie low for a few days, and this isolated little cabin suits our purposes just fine." "This is my home," Johanna stated, her voice steadier than she felt. "I will not be driven from it." "Who said anything about driving you away?" Hardin's smile turned predatory. "We'd welcome your company. It gets lonely on the trail." Johanna took a step back, calculating the distance to the cabin, knowing she couldn't outrun them but unwilling to submit without resistance. "The sheriff and his men will be back soon," she warned. "They're hunting rustlers in these parts." Something flashed in Hardin's eyes, a moment of calculation, perhaps even concern. "Is that so? Well, they're on a fool's errand. They won't find what they're looking for." "They know about the canyon," Johanna said, taking a gamble based on Owen's information. "They know about your operation." Hardin's expression hardened. "You seem mighty well informed for a woman alone on a homestead. Who's been talking to you?" Before Johanna could respond, the sound of approaching riders interrupted the confrontation. All eyes turned toward the trail where a cloud of dust signaled multiple horsemen approaching at speed. "Trouble," the third rustler muttered, his hand moving to his gun. Hardin cursed under his breath. "Back to the horses, now." The men retreated hastily, mounting and spurring their horses away just as the newcomers came into view. To Johanna's immense relief, she recognized Miguel leading several Double C Ranch hands. "Miss Mills," Miguel called as they approached, "are you unharmed? We saw riders leaving as we arrived." "I'm fine," Johanna assured him, though her knees felt weak with delayed fear. "But those men," the leader called himself Hardin. "He's the one behind the rustling." Miguel's expression darkened. "Hardin, you are certain?" He introduced himself, Johanna confirmed. "They wanted to use my cabin to lie low," as he put it. "I think the posse may be riding into a trap." Miguel conferred rapidly with his men in Spanish, then turned back to Johanna. "We must warn them. Santos, ride to town, tell the sheriff's deputy what has happened. The rest of us will try to catch up with the posse." "I'm coming with you," Johanna stated firmly. "I can identify Hardin." "It is too dangerous, señorita," Miguel objected. "The patron would never forgive. Owen isn't here," Johanna interrupted, already moving toward the corral where Penny was tethered. "And I'm not asking permission. Those men threaten me in my own home. Besides, you may need every rider you can get if the posse is ambushed." Miguel looked as if he might argue further, then apparently thought better of it. "Very well, but stay close, and if there is fighting, you remain behind with the horses." "Comprend, understood," Johanna agreed, saddling Penny with swift efficiency. Within minutes, they were riding hard toward the southwest, following the trail the posse had taken days earlier. Miguel set a punishing pace, pushing their mounts as much as he dared. They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take some water. As night fell, Miguel reluctantly called a halt. "The horses need rest," he explained. "And we risk missing the trail in the dark. We will start again at first light." They made a cold camp, not risking a fire that might attract attention. Johanna huddled in her blanket, exhausted but too worried to sleep soundly. Owen and the others might be riding into danger. Unaware that Hardin was no longer at the hideout, morning came with a gray drizzle that turned the trail muddy but didn't slow their pace. By mid-morning, they had reached rougher country rocky hills and narrow canyons where the trail became more difficult to follow. Miguel's experience proved invaluable as he pointed out signs of the posse's passage: a fresh cut branch here, a disturbed stone there. It was near noon when they heard the distant sound of gunfire echoing through the canyons. Miguel immediately signaled for them to dismount and proceed with caution. Leaving 2 men with the horses, he led Johanna and the others forward on foot, following the sounds of the firefight. They crested a ridge to see the battle below, the posse pinned down in a narrow ravine, taking fire from rustlers positioned on the surrounding heights. From their vantage point, Johanna could make out Owen and Sheriff Miller huddled behind a boulder, coordinating the posse's defense. "They are trapped," Miguel observed grimly. "The rustlers have the high ground." "Can we reach them?" Johanna asked, scanning the terrain anxiously. Miguel studied the situation, then nodded toward a brush-covered slope to their right. "Perhaps there. It would give us a position above the rustlers, but it is risky." "It's their only chance," Johanna pointed out. "They're outnumbered and outpositioned." With a nod of agreement, Miguel led them carefully down the slope, using the brush for cover as they worked their way toward a position overlooking the rustlers. When they were in place, he distributed ammunition and issued quiet instructions. "Aim for the men on the right first," he directed. "That will clear a path for the posse to retreat if necessary. Señorita, you will stay here in cover." But Johanna began to protest. "No arguments," Miguel cut her off firmly. "The patron would have my head if anything happened to you. You have done your part by coming this far." Before she could respond, Miguel gave the signal, and his men opened fire on the unsuspecting rustlers. The surprise attack from above threw the outlaws into confusion, allowing the posse to rally and begin returning fire more effectively. Johanna watched anxiously as the battle unfolded, her gaze fixed on Owen as he directed the posse's movements. The fighting was intense but brief. Caught between 2 forces, the rustlers soon began to retreat, abandoning their advantageous positions. As the gunfire subsided, Johanna saw Owen emerge cautiously from cover, scanning the ridge where Miguel and his men had positioned themselves. When he spotted Johanna, even at a distance, his expression was one of disbelief, followed quickly by concern. The reunion that followed was chaotic, men calling to each other, checking for injuries, securing prisoners. Owen made his way directly to Johanna, his face a mixture of relief and anger. "What in God's name are you doing here?" he demanded, gripping her arms as if to assure himself she was real and unharmed. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" "Hardin came to my homestead," Johanna explained quickly. "He and 2 others. They wanted to use my cabin as a hideout if Miguel hadn't arrived when he did." Owen's expression shifted from anger to alarm. "Hardin was at your place? When?" "Yesterday afternoon. Miguel and his men scared them off, but I knew you needed to be warned that the canyon might be a trap." Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes, followed by reluctant admiration. "So you rode all this way to warn us? Damn it, Johanna, that was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever heard of." "Perhaps a bit of both," she conceded with a small smile, "but it seems we arrived just in time." "That you did," he acknowledged, his grip on her arms softening to something closer to a caress. "Miguel's men turned the tide. We were in a bad spot." Sheriff Miller approached, interrupting their conversation. Callahan, we need to organize pursuit of those who escaped. And Miss Mills, he tipped his hat respectfully. Your information about Hardin is invaluable. We captured 3 of his men, including his second in command. With their testimony, we can finally put an end to this operation. The next hours were consumed with treating the wounded, thankfully none seriously injured, securing prisoners, and establishing a camp for the night. Throughout it all, Owen remained close to Johanna, as if unwilling to let her out of his sight after the danger she had faced. As evening settled over the makeshift camp, they found a moment of privacy near one of the small fires. Owen handed Johanna a cup of coffee, studying her face in the flickering light. "You could have been killed," he said quietly. "If Hardin had decided to force his way into your cabin, or if you'd been caught in the crossfire here." "But I wasn't," Johanna replied simply, "and neither were you, which is what matters." Owen shook his head, a rueful smile touching his lips. "You are the most stubborn, independent, fearless woman I have ever known, Johanna Mills, and I am finding it increasingly difficult to imagine my life without you in it." The directness of his statement caught her off guard. "Owen, you don't need to respond," he interrupted gently. "Not now, not here. But when we return to civilization, when this business is settled, I hope you'll allow me to court you properly. Not as a neighbor helping a neighbor, but as a man who has come to care deeply for a remarkable woman." Johanna felt her heart quicken at his words. The barrier she had maintained since arriving in Copper Creek, the determination to rely solely on herself, to need no one, seemed suddenly less important than the connection that had grown between them. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would be amenable to such an arrangement." "On equal terms, of course." Owen's smile broadened, warming his eyes in the firelight. "I would expect nothing less. You've more than proven your capability and courage." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the flames dance. Around them, men moved about the camp, tending to duties or settling in for the night. The danger had passed, but a watchfulness remained, sentries posted, weapons close at hand. "What will happen now?" Johanna asked eventually, "with Hardin still at large?" "The sheriff believes the prisoners will reveal his likely destinations," Owen explained. "Hardin's operation is finished here, too many men captured, too much attention. He'll run, try to establish himself elsewhere." "Will you join the hunt for him?" Owen considered the question. "If needed, yes. But my primary responsibility is to my ranch and my men, and now, perhaps, to other priorities as well." He glanced at her meaningfully. The journey back to Copper Creek took 2 days, with the posse moving at a measured pace to accommodate the prisoners and the few wounded men. Johanna rode beside Owen, their conversation ranging from practical matters of ranching and farming to deeper discussions of books they had both read, experiences that had shaped them, hopes for the future. By the time they reached town, something had shifted between them, a mutual recognition that what had begun as neighborly assistance had evolved into something far more meaningful. The town welcomed the returning posse with relief and celebration. News of the successful raid spread quickly, and by evening, an impromptu gathering had formed at the saloon, with free drinks for the men who had helped end the rustlers' threat. Johanna declined to join the celebrations, preferring instead to return to her homestead after the exhausting journey. Owen insisted on escorting her, despite his own fatigue. "To ensure you arrive safely," he explained as they rode side by side in the gathering dusk, "and perhaps to delay our parting a little longer." At her cabin, they found everything as she had left it, undisturbed by further unwelcome visitors. Owen checked the perimeter out of habit before joining Johanna on the porch. "Thank you for seeing me home," she said, suddenly shy despite all they had experienced together. "And for understanding why I chose to warn you, even against Miguel's initial objections." "I understand your reasons," Owen replied, "even if the thought of you in danger still terrifies me." He took her hand gently. "Johanna, when I said I wanted to court you properly, I meant it. But I also respect your independence. I don't want to change who you are, your strength, your determination. They're part of what I admire about you." Johanna felt something warm unfurl within her chest at his words. "And I don't want you to be less than who you are," she responded. "Your integrity, your sense of responsibility to others, they're qualities I've come to value greatly." Owen's free hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the touch feather light. May I call on you this Sunday for that dinner we keep postponing?" "I'd like that," Johanna replied softly. "Very much." He leaned forward slowly, giving her ample opportunity to withdraw if she wished. Instead, Johanna met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a culmination, gentle yet promising, respectful yet undeniably passionate. When they parted, Owen's expression was one of wonder and contentment. "Until Sunday, then," he murmured, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Until Sunday," she echoed, watching as he mounted and rode away, the setting sun gilding his figure against the horizon. As Johanna entered her cabin, her home, she felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. She had come west seeking independence and a fresh start. She had found those things, yes, but also something she hadn't been looking for. A community that valued her for herself, neighbors who helped without expecting subservience in return, and a man who respected her strength even as he offered his own. The silver dollar that had started it all, Owen's casual generosity at the blacksmith shop, still sat on her small shelf, a reminder of how unexpected encounters could change the course of a life. Johanna picked it up, feeling its weight in her palm. She would repay that debt eventually, but some debts of kindness, of courage, of growing affection created bonds rather than burdens. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, bright pinpoints of light in the vast wilderness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work on her homestead, new steps in her evolving relationship with Owen. But for now, in this moment, Johanna Mills felt something she had almost forgotten was possible: a sense of belonging, of home, of hope for the future. She couldn't have known, that day at the smithy when she couldn't pay for Penny's shoes, how a simple gesture would lead to this, standing in her own cabin, looking out at land that was hers, her heart opening to possibilities she had once firmly rejected. Life in the West was unpredictable, often dangerous, but also rich with opportunity for those brave enough to seize it, and Johanna was nothing if not brave. The seasons turned as they inevitably do. Summer gave way to autumn, bringing cooler nights and golden days perfect for harvest. Johanna's small garden yielded better than expected enough vegetables to see her through winter with careful preservation, plus some to trade in town for goods she couldn't produce herself. Owen called regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, seeds for her garden, a length of pretty fabric from the general store. More valuable than these tokens was the time they spent together, building a relationship based on mutual respect and growing affection. They established a routine of Sunday dinners, alternating between her homestead and his ranch. Sometimes they were joined by friends, the Petersons, Miguel and his family, other neighbors who had become part of Johanna's expanding circle. Other times they dined alone, their conversations ranging from practical matters to philosophical discussions that often lasted well into the evening. In October, Owen helped Johanna add a second room to her cabin, a proper bedroom that would allow the main room to serve exclusively as living and cooking space. The project took several weekends, with various neighbors joining the effort in the spirit of community that defined frontier life. "It's coming along well," Owen observed one evening as they stood together admiring the nearly completed addition. "You'll be comfortable here this winter." "Thanks to you and everyone who helped," Johanna acknowledged. "I could never have managed this alone." Owen took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "That's something I've come to appreciate about life out here. No one truly succeeds alone, not even the most stubborn, independent souls." He smiled, squeezing her fingers gently. "I've learned that lesson too," Johanna admitted. "Though it wasn't an easy one for me to accept. The best lessons rarely are," Owen replied. "But you've built something remarkable here, Johanna, not just the physical improvements, but relationships, community. You belong here now." The truth of his words warmed her. She did belong to this place, to these people, to this life she had chosen. And increasingly, she felt she belonged with Owen, whose patience and understanding had given her the space to reach that conclusion in her own time. As winter approached, bringing the first dusting of snow to the higher elevations, Copper Creek prepared for the season's isolation. Supplies were laid in, firewood stacked, preserves sealed in jars. The town held a harvest festival, a last community gathering before winter would make travel between homesteads more challenging. At the festival dance, held in the newly completed schoolhouse, Owen led Johanna onto the floor for a waltz. They moved together with practiced ease, having danced at several social gatherings over the preceding months. "You look beautiful tonight," Owen said, his voice low enough for her ears alone. "That blue brings out your eyes." Johanna smiled, pleased by the compliment. The dress was new, made from the fabric he had gifted her, sewn in the evenings by lamplight. "Thank you for the fabric and the sentiment." As the dance ended, Owen didn't immediately release her hand. Instead, he led her toward the door. "Walk with me, just for a moment." Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars brilliant in the black sky. Owen guided her to a bench beneath a bare-branched oak, just beyond the pools of light spilling from the schoolhouse windows. "I've been wanting to speak with you," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "About us." "About the future." Johanna felt her heart quicken, sensing the importance of this conversation. "I'm listening," she encouraged. Owen took both her hands in his expression earnest in the starlight. "These past months have been the happiest of my life, Johanna. Getting to know you, watching you build your homestead, seeing your courage and determination, it's only deepened my admiration and affection for you." "I feel the same," Johanna replied softly. "You've shown me that independence doesn't have to mean isolation. That accepting help isn't the same as surrendering autonomy." "I'm glad," Owen said, his smile visible even in the dim light, "because what I'm about to propose requires both independence and partnership in equal measure." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that gleamed in his palm. "Johanna Mills, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had begun to anticipate this moment, the reality of it still caught Johanna by surprise, not the proposal itself, but the depth of certainty she felt about her answer. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Owen, I will." His smile broadened as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "I want you to know," he continued seriously, "that I don't expect you to give up your homestead or your independence. We can divide our time between both properties or make other arrangements that respect what you've built." Johanna felt tears prick her eyes at his understanding. "Thank you for that. It matters to me not just the land itself, but what it represents, a fresh start on my own terms." "I understand," Owen assured her. "Our marriage should enhance both our lives, not diminish either." They sealed their agreement with a kiss, tender and full of promise. When they returned to the dance, their joined hands and Johanna's new ring told the story without words. Congratulations flowed from friends and neighbors, genuine in their warmth and approval. The wedding took place on Christmas Day, a date chosen partly for practicality. The holiday already brought people to town despite winter weather, and partly for sentiment. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries, candles casting a golden glow over the proceedings. Johanna wore a dress of ivory silk that Vivian Peterson had helped her order from Denver, with her mother's cameo at her throat and tiny sprigs of winter berries in her upswept hair. Owen, resplendent in a new black suit, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression of such joy and devotion that several of the women present dabbed at their eyes. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken with clear conviction. Afterward, the entire town gathered at the hotel for a celebration that lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to satisfy even the hardiest appetites. As the festivities wound down, Owen led his new wife to a waiting sleigh, decorated with ribbons and bells for the occasion. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Callahan?" he asked, helping her into the conveyance. "Which home?" Johanna inquired with a smile, settling the warm lap robe over her knees. "Whichever you prefer," Owen replied, joining her and taking up the reins. "Though I had thought perhaps the ranch for tonight. It's closer and the weather looks threatening." Indeed, clouds had begun to gather, promising more snow before morning. Johanna nodded her agreement, and they set off, the sleigh's bells jingling merrily as they left the town behind. The Double C Ranch welcomed them with warmth and light, the main house decorated for the season and a fire blazing in the hearth of the master bedroom. Owen had arranged everything for their comfort, down to the smallest detail. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Johanna reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the desperate young woman who couldn't pay the blacksmith, to a successful homesteader, to a bride, each step had built upon the last, creating a life she could never have imagined back in Boston. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his voice soft in the darkness as he traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how far I've come," Johanna replied honestly, "and how different my life might have been if you hadn't tossed that silver dollar on the counter that day." Owen chuckled, pulling her closer. "Best investment I ever made, though I'm still waiting for you to let me put more than that one shoe repair on my tab." Johanna smiled against his chest. "Perhaps I'll allow it, occasionally, when absolutely necessary." "Such generosity," he teased, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'm truly blessed." Spring brought new life to the land and new patterns to their shared existence. As promised, Owen respected Johanna's attachment to her homestead, and they divided their time between the two properties. The small cabin remained Johanna's particular domain, a place for her garden, her personal projects, her occasional need for solitude. The ranch, meanwhile, thrived under their joint stewardship. Johanna brought her organizational skills and Eastern education to the business aspects, implementing record-keeping systems and correspondence practices that improved efficiency and profitability. Owen continued to manage the day-to-day operations with the same combination of firmness and fairness that had earned his men's loyalty. Together, they created a partnership that drew on each other's strengths while respecting individual preferences and abilities. It wasn't always seamless. Both were strong-willed individuals with definite opinions, but they had learned the art of compromise, of listening as well as speaking. In late summer, as the first anniversary of their meeting approached, Johanna shared news that would reshape their future yet again. "A child," Owen repeated, his expression transforming from surprise to radiant joy. "You're certain Dr. Peterson confirmed it yesterday?" Johanna nodded, her own happiness mingled with the normal concerns of impending motherhood. "The baby should arrive in early spring." Owen gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious glass. "A family," he murmured against her hair. "Our family." As the months passed and Johanna's condition became evident, preparations began for the new arrival. The bedroom in their ranch house was remodeled to accommodate a nursery alcove, and Owen crafted a cradle from cherry wood, working on it in the evenings by the fire. "It's beautiful," Johanna said when it was finished, running her hand over the smooth, polished wood. "Our child will have the most elegant bed in the territory. Nothing but the best for the next generation of Callahans," Owen replied proudly, "though I hope he or she inherits your intelligence rather than my stubborn streak." "With our combined stubbornness, this child will be unstoppable," Johanna laughed, placing his hand over the spot where their baby had just kicked. The winter was mild by local standards, for which Johanna was grateful as her mobility decreased. Friends visited regularly, bringing gifts for the baby and companionship for the mother-to-be. Vivian Peterson was especially attentive, sharing her own experiences of motherhood and offering practical advice. On a clear March morning, with the first wildflowers beginning to bloom in sheltered spots, Johanna went into labor. Owen sent riders for Dr. Peterson and for Miguel's wife, Maria, who had experience as a midwife. Both arrived quickly, taking charge of the situation with calm efficiency. After hours of labor, just as the sun was setting, their daughter entered the world with a robust cry that immediately captured her father's heart. She was perfect tiny fingers and toes, a dusting of dark hair, eyes that would eventually reveal themselves to be the same blue as her father's. "Catherine," Johanna said weakly, holding her newborn for the first time. "After my mother, Catherine Rose Callahan." "It's perfect," Owen agreed, his voice thick with emotion as he perched on the edge of the bed, one arm around his wife, the other hand gently stroking his daughter's cheek. "She's perfect, you're perfect, all of it." The years that followed brought changes large and small to their lives. Catherine Katie, to her adoring parents, grew into a spirited child with her mother's determination and her father's charm. A brother joined the family 2 years later, named Thomas after Johanna's cousin whose legacy had brought her west. The Double C Ranch prospered, expanding its operations to include not just cattle but also horses, becoming known throughout the territory for the quality of its stock. Johanna's homestead evolved into a productive farm that supplied much of the family's food and became a testing ground for new crop varieties suited to the local climate. Copper Creek itself grew, transitioning from frontier outpost to established town with the arrival of the railroad in 1885. New businesses opened, more families settled, and the community that had welcomed Johanna now welcomed others seeking fresh starts and opportunities. Through it all, Owen and Johanna's partnership deepened, weathering the inevitable challenges of life drought years that threatened the ranch, illness that confined Katie to bed for a frightening month, the normal strains of balancing work and family responsibilities. Their bond, forged in the early days of mutual respect and growing affection, proved resilient. On the 10th anniversary of that fateful day at the blacksmith shop, Owen presented Johanna with a small velvet box. Inside lay a silver dollar, mounted as a brooch and surrounded by small diamonds. "To commemorate the best investment I ever made," he explained, pinning it to her dress. "And to thank you for proving me right all those years ago." "About what?" Johanna asked, admiring the glittering memento. Owen's smile was warm with remembrance and present joy. "That you were worth every cent and then some. That beneath that fierce independence was a woman of extraordinary courage and capacity for love. You saw more clearly than I did," Johanna admitted, touching the brooch gently. "I was so determined to stand alone that I nearly missed the chance to stand beside someone instead." "Well, Mrs. Callahan," Owen replied, drawing her into his arms, "I'm profoundly grateful that you eventually saw the wisdom in my perspective." Johanna laughed, returning his embrace. "As am I, Mr. Callahan. As am I." Outside, the Arizona sun bathed their land in golden light, illuminating the life they had built together, a life neither could have created alone, but which they had forged through mutual respect, shared labor, and enduring love. From a single silver dollar to a legacy that would sustain generations, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have imagined on that summer day when a cowboy's generosity met a woman's pride, and both were forever changed.